It is around 1300 BCE. Neferhotep is sitting against the wall of his house in Deir el-Medina, and he cannot sleep. Not because of the heat, not because of the children. There is a tooth in the back of his jaw that has been building toward this moment for 20 years, one grain of sand at a time, and tonight it has arrived. He does not know the word abscess. He does not know that bacteria have entered through the exposed pulp and are now producing the pressure that is making it impossible to think. What he knows is that there is something alive inside his tooth that is eating it. He has a name for it. Everyone does. The worm. By morning, his wife will grind something from the house stores and press it against his jaw. Whether it works depends entirely on what she reaches for first. And that gap between what they reached for and what actually worked is the most revealing thing about how this civilization understood pain. Here is what nobody tells you about Egyptian teeth. We picture a civilization of pyramid builders as physically exceptional, strong, enduring, built for stone and desert. What we find in the mummies is something different. A study of 4,800 ancient Egyptian teeth found that nearly 90% showed significant wear. Not some wear, not occasional wear, 90%. And this was not a disease of the poor. The mummy of Amenhotep III, one of the most powerful rulers in Egyptian history, a man who commanded armies and built temples, shows multiple alveolar abscesses and lost front teeth at the time of his death. Ramesses II, whose reign lasted 66 years and whose face appears on monuments across Egypt, had an abscess documented in his mummy. Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh who built one of the most remarkable mortuary temples in the ancient world, may have died in part from complications of a pulled tooth. The cause was not what you might expect. It was bread. Grain was ground using stone querns, flat grinding stones that inevitably shed fine particles of quartz, flint, and sand into the flour. Every loaf of Egyptian bread contained abrasive grit. Every meal, every day. From childhood through old age, the teeth of an ancient Egyptian were being slowly ground down by the food that kept them alive. The wear was so consistent and so severe that researchers classify it in 4 stages. Stage 1. Slight enamel loss, probably no symptoms. Stage 2. Dentin exposed, likely discomfort. Stage 3. Pulp approaching exposure, significant pain. Stage 4. Pulp fully exposed, bacteria enter, infection begins. Most adult mummies are at stage 3 or 4. This was not an occasional problem. This was the permanent background condition of life in ancient Egypt. Once the pulp was exposed, what happened next was mechanical and inevitable. Bacteria colonized the pulp chamber. The infection spread to the root. An abscess formed, a pocket of pus and dead tissue pressing outward against bone. The jaw swelled. The pain became constant. And in some cases, the infection did not stay in the jaw. It spread through the bloodstream. It became sepsis. It killed people. Neferhotep knows none of this mechanism, but he knows what to reach for. The Ebers Papyrus, written around 1550 BCE, but compiled from older sources, covering 870 remedies across 110 pages, contains 11 recipes specifically for oral problems. 4 of them address loose or painful teeth. The approach is consistent: a filler agent combined with a liquid matrix and an antiseptic component. Ground barley mixed with honey and yellow ochre, packed into the cavity or pressed against the gum. The barley fills the space. The honey has real antibacterial properties. Its low pH and hydrogen peroxide content actually inhibit bacterial growth. The yellow ochre contains iron oxides that may reduce inflammation. This was not pure superstition. Parts of it worked, not because anyone understood why, but because 3,000 years of iteration had produced combinations that reliably did something. The Ebers Papyrus also prescribes willow, leaves and bark, for pain and inflammation. This is the same plant that gave the 19th century salicylic acid, and from that, aspirin. Willow bark contains salicin, which the body converts to salicylic acid. The Egyptians were dispensing the chemical precursor to aspirin approximately 3,400 years before Felix Hoffmann synthesized the commercial version at Bayer in 1897. They did not know what salicin was, they knew that willow worked. That is the entire history of pharmacology before the 19th century. Observation without mechanism, iteration without theory, results that accumulated into practice. Myrrh appeared frequently in dental preparations. Myrrh contains terpenoids with genuine anti-inflammatory properties. It reduces swelling. It has mild analgesic effects. It was expensive, traded across long distances from southern Arabia and the Horn of Africa, which meant that what the Ebers Papyrus prescribed for dental pain was, for a painter in Deir el-Medina, approximately as accessible as a specialist consultation is for someone today without health insurance. The recipe exists. Getting the ingredients is another problem. So Neferhotep probably uses what his wife actually has. Honey, available. Garlic, available. And allicin in garlic is a real antimicrobial agent. Onion, available. Same family of sulfur compounds. These were not the prestigious ingredients of the papyrus. These were the working-class version of the same pharmacological logic. Something antibacterial pressed against the source of the infection. It did not cure the abscess. It may have reduced the surface bacterial load enough to slow the progression. It probably dulled the pain slightly through inflammation reduction. And then Neferhotep went back to work, because he had to. Here is where the class structure of ancient Egypt becomes visible in the teeth. The Ebers Papyrus was a court document. It was written by scribes for physicians who treated the elite. Of the approximately 150 named physicians in ancient Egyptian records, 9 are specifically identified as dentists. 9. In a civilization of several million people, these 9 worked at the palace, at the court, for the administrators and officials, and occasionally for the pharaoh himself. There is no evidence that a dental specialist ever treated a worker in Deir el-Medina. What the workers had was the knowledge that filtered down, the basic recipes that everyone knew, the folk medicine that did not require a physician to prepare. The most famous dentist in Egyptian history is Hesy-Ra. He lived around 2650 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Djoser. He was a contemporary of the step pyramid being built 4 kilometers from his eventual tomb. His mastaba at Saqqara, numbered S2405, was excavated by Auguste Mariette in 1861 and more thoroughly by James Quibble between 1910 and 1912. The tomb walls, 43 meters of corridor, are decorated with scenes from daily life. Most significantly, 6 panels carved from acacia wood depict Hesy-Ra at different stages of his life. One of his titles, carved in hieroglyphics, reads Werebe Sinjwa. The translation is contested. It means either Great One of the Dentists or Great One of the Ivory Cutters. The ambiguity has never been fully resolved. What is not ambiguous is that he was the first named dental specialist in recorded human history, 4,670 years ago, and that his specialty was already important enough to require a dedicated title. What did Hesy-Ra actually do for a toothache? Almost certainly pharmaceutical treatments, the pastes and rinses and poultices described in the papyri. Whether he performed any surgical intervention on living patients is the question that has divided Egyptologists for a century. Here is the problem with Egyptian dental surgery. There are 8 osteological examples in the literature that have been proposed as evidence of interventive dental therapy: attempted extractions, drilled abscesses, dental splints. Of those 8, a rigorous 2022 review in the Journal of Stomatology concluded that only 4 can be plausibly attributed to procedures performed during life. The others are most likely post-mortem preparations, procedures done to the body after death to make it complete for the afterlife. This matters because of what it implies about pain relief. If most Egyptian dental surgery happened after death, if the gold wire bridge found at Giza around 2500 BCE was placed on the corpse during mummification rather than in a living patient, then the most powerful rulers in Egypt spent their lives with abscesses and lost teeth and simply endured it. The recipes in the papyrus were the best available treatment. The worm was the best available explanation. And the worm, it turned out, was not entirely wrong as a metaphor. Something was eating the teeth from inside, but it was catastrophically wrong as a mechanism, and because the mechanism was wrong, the treatment derived from it was useless. The treatment for the worm was incantation first, fumigation second. You burned a candle near the tooth to drive the worm out with heat. You spoke words from the Papyrus Anastasi, a text dating to around 1200 BCE, that explicitly names the worm as the cause of toothache, describing an official whose every muscle of his face twitches, the disease has developed in his eye, and the worm grows into his tooth. The fumigation heated the pulp and almost certainly worsened the inflammation. The incantation had no effect. And yet this treatment persisted in various forms, not just in Egypt, but across Mesopotamia, Greece, China, India, and eventually medieval Europe, the last documented belief in the toothworm persisting in some rural populations into the early 20th century CE. Neferhotep knows about the worm. He has probably heard the words that are supposed to drive it out. He uses the honey and the garlic and the willow his wife gathered from the riverbank. The abscess does not resolve. It drains, maybe, through the bone. There is evidence in some mummies of sinus tracts where infection broke through, or it does not drain, and the pressure builds until the tooth cracks or the infection spreads, or Neferhotep simply learns to exist alongside the pain the way people learn to exist alongside anything that does not immediately kill them. 3 streets away from Neferhotep's house, the site overseer has access to a physician. The physician has the full Ebers Papyrus inventory, the myrrh, the resins, the prepared pastes with yellow ochre. The physician may attempt to pack the cavity. A mummy examined by CT scan in 2020 showed evidence of a cavity packed with what appears to be linen, possibly soaked in fig juice or cedar oil as a medicinal carrier. This is the Egyptian version of a temporary filling. It addressed the symptom. It did not address the infection. The abscess forming at the root was not visible, not understood, not reachable with anything available in 1300 BCE. Now consider the pharaoh. Amenhotep III ruled for approximately 37 years, a reign of exceptional prosperity and architectural achievement. His mummy, examined by modern researchers, is described as almost a catalog of dental pathology: abscesses, worn teeth, gum disease, broken and missing teeth. He had access to every physician in Egypt. He had the myrrh and the willow and the honey. He had Hesy-Ra's professional descendants at the palace. And he spent his final years, the years when he was still making diplomatic decisions and conducting correspondence with Babylonian kings, in what must have been constant pain. The Amarna letters from his reign, diplomatic tablets in cuneiform, show a man conducting the affairs of empire. The teeth show a man enduring something that would today require a course of antibiotics and a root canal. There was no antibiotic. There was no root canal. There was no local anesthetic. That development would require another 3,000 years and the synthesis of cocaine derivatives in the 19th century. What there was, for Amenhotep and for Neferhotep alike, was the worm and the willow and the honey and the hope that morning would bring something less than this. The willow bark was the closest thing to aspirin in the ancient world, and aspirin treats inflammation and pain, not infection. It made the abscess hurt less. It did not make the abscess smaller. The distinction between pain relief and cure, between treating the symptom and addressing the cause, is a distinction that required germ theory to become legible. And germ theory arrived in the 1860s with Pasteur, 3,400 years after the Ebers Papyrus was written. Here is the thing about the bread. The same civilization that ground its teeth down on sand-contaminated flour also produced one of the earliest and most sophisticated pharmacological documents in human history. The same daily meal that created the epidemic of dental disease also drove the demand for the remedies. The willow worked because the bread created the need. The honey worked because the bread created the infection. The myrrh was traded across thousands of kilometers because every person who ate Egyptian bread eventually needed it. The disease and the medicine were produced by the same civilization, at the same table, from the same grain. Neferhotep goes back to work. The painting continues. The abscess continues. He has been applying honey for 3 days and the swelling has not gone down. There is a remedy in the papyrus, he has heard it described, that involves pressing half the body of a freshly killed mouse, still warm, against the aching tooth. The mouse was sacred to the sun, believed capable of fending off death. The logic was religious rather than pharmaceutical. If the mouse could fend off death, perhaps it could fend off the thing in the tooth that was working toward it. He probably tries it. The warm tissue against the exposed root probably made it worse. He probably tries it anyway, because when the alternative is the worm and the pain and nothing else, you try the mouse. 4,000 years later, researchers in Germany identified the active analgesic component in willow bark and synthesized a stable, commercially viable version that a person could take with a glass of water in approximately 30 seconds. It addresses the inflammation that Neferhotep's willow was reaching for. It does not address the infection. For the infection, there is a class of drugs derived from the accidental contamination of a petri dish in a London laboratory in 1928, when Alexander Fleming noticed that a mold called Penicillium notatum had killed the bacteria growing around it. Penicillin. One course of amoxicillin would have resolved Neferhotep's abscess in 7 to 10 days. The willow got him to aspirin. The mold got him to penicillin. Both discoveries required knowing what he never knew, what the worm actually was, and why it could not be driven out with heat or words or the body of a mouse pressed warm against the tooth. Neferhotep knew pain. He knew what to put against it. He did not know why any of it worked or didn't, and that gap between the effect and the mechanism is the distance between 1300 BCE and the present day, measured in teeth. What would you have reached for? The honey? The willow? The mouse? Let me know in the comments. Until then, see you soon.